What's up everybody and welcome to the shop. Today I am going to show you around this custom built workshop. I'm going to talk about what works, what doesn't work, and things I'd like to upgrade in the future. I know most people watch these videos in order to get inspiration for their own shops at home, so I'll try to be as helpful as I can and point out as many little details as possible. So first off, let's start with some basics. This shop is 15 feet wide by 38 feet deep, which is essentially the same width as a single car garage, but then stretched to twice its normal length. And I know that's a bit of a weird configuration, but that's because me and my dad actually custom built this workshop from the ground up. And I mean from the ground up. We ripped out the old foundation and started completely from scratch. Ostensibly, we built this workshop to support our construction and home renovation business, but on evenings and weekends, it's also the place where I record these YouTube videos. And my dad also does personal projects in here too. I'll show you some of his stuff while we're doing the tour. It's a very multi-purpose workspace. Before we get started on the tour though, I have to tell you about the sponsor of today's video, Skillshare. They say that those who can't do teach, but I think it might be time that we retire that expression. For the past couple of weeks, I've been taking Marquez Brownlee's class on YouTube success. He walks you through everything from scripting, to shooting, to editing, to basically everything you need to know in order to craft the perfect YouTube video. And you better believe that I'm taking all the things I learned in that class and applying them to creating this video. Can we just take a second to appreciate how crazy it is that you can take classes on how to make YouTube videos from one of the best YouTubers around? It's crazy, right? So remind me again why it is that people say that those who can't do teach? Skillshare members have unlimited access to a wide range of classes from everything from photography to business analytics, all completely ad-free. And what makes Skillshare's service so unique is that all the classes are taught by creative professionals working in the field, so you know they know what they're talking about. It's a great service. I've been enjoying it a lot, and I think you will too. Right now, Skillshare has a special offer for my viewers. The first 1,000 people to register with the link in the video description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare, so you can start exploring your creativity today. Okay, so honestly, I can't think of a better way to organize this video, so we're gonna start here at the front of the shop and then just slowly work our way to the back. Right as you come in on the left, we have these material storage racks. These storage racks are just big enough to store 4x8 sheet goods, and then over here on the side, we have some smaller racks for, well, smaller pieces. These storage racks are as close as possible to the front door. That way, when you're bringing materials into the shop, you can just tuck them right in there. It's a nice short trip and you don't have to take them through the shop. Now, one thing I wish that we didn't do was put this little piece of 1/4-inch plywood here on the ground to hold these racks together. Because when you go to take a piece of plywood and put it in the shop, you have to lift up the leading edge in order to get it in. You can't just slide it right in because it'll get caught. So if you're gonna make your own storage racks at home, I strongly suggest you make them flush with the floor. It's a pretty small thing, but honestly, it's a big pain. I can't count the number of times that I've tried to get a piece of plywood in there, gotten stuck, and then gotten frustrated. Next up, we have the combi boiler right here next to the storage rack. This whole shop is heated with a radiant floor system. Embedded inside this floor is a network of plastic PEX pipes that run back to the combi boiler. They circulate hot water through the concrete slab, which then in turn radiates that heat up into the space. As far as I'm concerned, this is the best way to heat a space. I've done it for a number of clients. It's super space efficient. There's basically no ducting to speak of, and it's also a really nice way to heat the space because it's nice and even. This whole shop is insulated with spray foam insulation, so it's very cheap to maintain a nice comfortable temperature in here. And while we're on the subject of concrete slab, let's talk about the floor itself. It's polished concrete with an acrylic sealer over the top. If you have a concrete floor in your shop, I definitely think it's worth sealing. It doesn't have to be anything fancy like an epoxy coating. Even paint would do the job because as you walk around on concrete, it continuously creates dust that gets in the air and it's just not very nice. Also, when you seal it, it makes it a lot easier to clean up because you can sweep things up without it getting caught in the grooves of the concrete. And actually, I polished this whole floor myself. We cast it and then I rented a polisher for the day and just went to town on it. It took about 8 hours to do the entire space, and if I'm being completely honest, I probably could have kept going a little bit longer because there are still a couple high spots that are kind of annoying at times. On the opposite wall here, we have some tool storage. Now, these are the tools that we use the most often on job sites, so we keep them nice and close to the door. And you can actually see that most of these racks are empty right now, and that's because we're working on a house right now, so most of these tools are out at a job site. We also keep stuff like blankets down here. It's just anything that goes out the door frequently, we keep as close to the door as possible. And then next to that, we have the big dust collector here. It's mounted up decently high, so it's kind of out of the way, but then all the ducting for it is run up above the rafters, so they're really out of the way. It's also remote controlled, so you don't have to walk over to it every time you want to turn it on. Takes a few times to get it sometimes. Now, one thing that I don't like about this dust collector is this catch can. It's opaque and it's really hard to know when it's full, and I'm pretty bad at checking it frequently to make sure that it's not full. And when it gets full, it backs up into the unit and into the filter, and it's a huge mess to clean up. So one thing I really like to do is replace this catch can with a clear one, or at least one with a window in it so that I can see when it gets full. Oh, and also the catch can is on wheels, so you can roll it out, which makes cleaning it a little easier. This is pretty full. I should clean this. Moving right along, let's talk about the table saw, the first major tool of this tour. And actually, this is a table saw and a router table in one. I actually bought this router table and left it in its original packaging for like a year without installing it. But I finally got around to doing it, and I'm really glad I did because it's super useful and I find myself using it quite a lot lately. This particular saw is the SawStop 3 horsepower professional saw, and it is a really nice saw. Even if it weren't for the whole brake system, it would still just be a really nicely put together table saw. And the reason it's so close to the front door is because, well, often you're bringing in big sheet goods and you want to break them down as soon as you get them in the shop, so that's why it's the first thing you see. You know what? I said that these cabinets here were reserved for tools that leave the shop frequently, but that's not entirely true. These 2 drawers here are reserved for accessories for the table saw and for the router table as well. I'm a big fan of magnets, so I've been trying to take advantage of the fact that this has a cast iron top. I've got a magnetic feather board for the table saw, and then also the router table fence is magnetic. I came up with the idea for this, but my dad actually went ahead and built it before I got a chance. We have a very small bathroom here, just big enough for a toilet and the world's smallest sink. And then next to that, we have the slop sink. Perfect for cleaning brushes, washing your hands at the end of the day, or just grabbing a glass of water at some point when you're thirsty. Adding this to the shop was a complete game changer. If you're doing any finishing in your shop, I highly suggest adding a sink if you can. And then underneath the slop sink is storage for finishing products. So there's a bunch of paint in here, and then in these upper drawers, there's some brushes and stuff like that. Oh, and before we get too far away from the front of the shop, there is a little storage mezzanine above the front area here. It's a little awkward to get up there. You need a ladder, but it's a good place for long-term storage, and it's a good use of vertical space as well. Next, we have these twin assembly tables. And I have kind of a love-hate relationship with these tables because they're great, but they're also kind of horrible. Let's start with the good stuff first. They've both got a ton of storage, like this one has all the sanding supplies in here, some more finishing stuff in here, tool storage on the end. They both got Formica tops, so they're really easy to clean and also really hard to scratch. And probably their best feature is that they're the same height as the table saw, so they also double as outfeed tables. And in fact, every single work surface and tool base in the shop is set to 34 inches. This was actually a very deliberate choice that we made so that you can span big materials across different work surfaces and always have them be able to be supported no matter where you're working from. And that brings me nicely to what I don't like about them. They're just too heavy. They're so overloaded with tools and materials that they're kind of a pain to push around, and also they've started to sag a bit. It's not horrible, but depending on what you're doing, it can be kind of annoying. Having a perfectly flat reference surface to work off of in the shop is a huge asset. But we'll talk more about how I plan on fixing this a little bit later in the video. For now, let's keep going with the tour. Over here, we have the miter station, and for some reason, this is probably my favorite part of the shop. I think it's probably got something to do with the twin saw setup. This one here in the back is Makita's cold cut saw. It's really great for cutting through metal and super handy when you're fabricating table bases. And then this bad boy right here is Bosch's 12-inch miter saw. Now, unfortunately, this is the North American model, so it lacks some of the nice to have features that the European model gets, but it's definitely still one of the best miter saws you can find. And I have it set up and connected to this Festool dust extractor, not the larger system in the rest of the shop. Now, you might be asking yourself why I did that, and the reason is pretty simple. It's all about convenience. As soon as I hit the switch on this miter saw, it activates the dust extractor. No need to fumble with a remote or even look for a remote. And since this dust extractor services multiple tools, I have it connected to this power bar here. That way, the miter saw can remain plugged in while I plug in something like this sander too. Then all I have to do is swap the hose. Honestly though, in the future, I would love to find some sort of way that I can do this without having to unplug the hose from the miter saw so that it can just stay plugged in there all the time. From side to side, this miter station is 17 feet wide, so you can cut some seriously long stock on it. And in fact, if you're willing to go unsupported, you could go off the end and cut even longer stock. Although I don't know exactly how long, so why don't we check real quick. 16 feet. Nice. And the wall behind the miter station is pretty well utilized too. We have some storage racks here with metal stuff down low and then longer pieces of wood up high. And then a little further back, we have some clamp storage, some battery charging stations. And like I said earlier, we actually have some of my dad's pieces here that he's working on. These are almost like little robots that he's making out of steel and then welding together on wood bases. They're pretty cool. Working our way down the bench, we have this compressor under here, which doesn't see a lot of use anymore. I've slowly been transitioning away from pneumatic tools to cordless electric ones. So at this point, this one is mostly just a blower offer of things. And then we have the last tool in the miter station, the drill press, which for some reason we put on a rolling base. I can't really remember why we decided to do that. I guess it'd be kind of handy if you're working on something really big and you wanted more space, but 99.99% of the time, it's just tucked away here in the station. Now, before we cover this back corner where all the heavy duty tools are, I want to direct your attention upwards to the ceiling because there's a couple of cool things I want to show you up there. I'll start with the lighting because lighting is very important to me. I film a lot of videos in here and lighting is a big part of getting your videos to look good. So on the ceiling, there are 12 fixtures, each with 2 bulbs producing something like 50,000 lumens. So no matter what the lighting conditions are outside, it basically always looks really well lit in here, which is important for filming, but it's also really nice for woodworking and seeing what you're doing. And all the bulbs are 100% LEDs, so they're nice and efficient too. As you can see, the entire ceiling is clad with TNG pine. We actually crunched the numbers on this, and it turned out to be cheaper to do the TNG pine than just drywalling it, and I think it gives the space a nice rustic kind of feel. There's also 2 really big skylights up there that let in a ton of natural light. Now, theoretically, those skylights do open to vent and let out hot air, but I have a much better solution for venting. Let me show you. See that fan up there? That is a whole house fan, and it's a lot of fun. By flipping this switch right here, I can activate it and start sucking all the air out of the shop. As you can see, it really works. If I'm ever doing anything stinky in the shop, like using spray paint, I just flip that switch, wait for 10 minutes, and it's completely sucked all the air out of the shop and replaced it with new fresh air from inside. And finally, there's one last little thing I want to share about the ceilings, and that's these drop-down extension cords that we have over both of the assembly tables. Now, these don't get a ton of use anymore because I've been using a lot more cordless tools lately, but they're still really nice to have. Instead of trying to plug things in and span the cords across the room to one of the wall plugs, you can just plug it in right where you're working. It's more convenient, and it's probably a little bit safer too. Okay, onto the tool corral. Nothing too exciting to share over here. This is just where the rolling tools live. We got the joiner, we got the planer, we got the drum sander. These are just the big heavy tools that kind of get used infrequently, so they're kept here off the shop floor when they're not in use. Funny story actually, these tools are so big and heavy that I was constantly denting the walls when I was putting them away, so I ended up cladding this whole back wall and the whole back wall behind the miter station in reclaimed boards. That way, you know, I'm still denting the walls when I put them away, but it's like if you ripped a pair of pre-ripped jeans. You're kind of just adding to that original rugged look. Out back behind the shop, we have a little interlocking stone pad, and this is where I tend to do all the dirty work that I don't want to do inside the shop. So I'll do stuff like metal grinding out here. We'll talk more about this pretty soon, but let me finish off the last 2 workstations inside the shop. First up, we have the welding station. This thing actually gets a ton of use. It started its life out as a slip cover that I made to fit over top of our assembly tables, but my dad and I ended up using it so much that he transformed it into a freestanding workstation by making this little frame for it. In the future, I'd really love to find a way to make it a little bit more compact by taking the welder itself and mounting it underneath the table, but even as is, it's a super rigid table. It's got webbing underneath that keeps it nice and flat, and I'm starting to build a nice little collection of welding blocks. These are some of the handiest tools you can have if you'd like to get into welding, so if you want to get some of your own, I've got a discount code down in the video description. Oh, and before I put it away, the little welder that I use is a Miller-Matic 211. It's really handy because it'll work on both 110 and 220 volt circuits. Very handy little tool. That brings us to this last workbench here, which is a holdover from the old shop, and right now it's really not living up to its full potential. As you can see, it's just functioning kind of like a catch-all. So I would like to completely redo this bench at some point in the near future. And I think that's a good transition as any to talk about the next part of this video, which is things that I would like to upgrade in the near to medium term future. First, we've got to address these tables. I think a full rebuild is in order, just like that bench, and I'd really like to integrate some steel into the frame in order to make them stronger. So what I'm thinking planning to do is create an angle iron steel box that I can then slot all of these existing boxes into. That way I can reuse some of these materials, but the angle iron will be able to keep everything nice and flat. But there's also another thing that I want to do with these tables. I really like to get into 3D printing and CNCing. So if possible, I would like to integrate a CNC machine into one of these tables. Maybe have it slide out on a track here, or even have like half the top of the table lift away to reveal the CNC bed machine. That's still something I'm kind of working on and thinking about the design, but I think computer-aided woodworking is super interesting, and it's something that I would really like to explore more on this channel. Oh, and I'd really also like to integrate some sort of T-track system into the side and potentially even the top of this. That way I could have integrated tie downs, integrated clamping spots all over the table surface. I think that would be really handy for sanding and finish work. Following that, I would love to hop in a time machine and redo this bench. If these tables are all about CNCs and the future of woodworking, I would like this bench to be an ode to more traditional woodworking. Along this wall, create all sorts of integrated storage for planes, chisels, handsaws, all that fun stuff. I just want a nice simple area where you can sit and look out the window while working on some dovetails and think about simpler times. Is that too far? Yeah, okay, that's a little too far. I don't have very detailed plans for this yet, but it's definitely something I've been thinking a lot about. All right, I know I said that the miter station was my favorite part of the shop, but that doesn't mean that there's not some room for improvement over there. Let's go talk about that. Over here, I would like to take the fence on the back of this miter saw and extend it wider, as wide as I can, really. And then I'd like to integrate some sort of stop block system into that fence. So maybe some sort of T-track along the top, and then you flip down a stop block. That way, I'll be able to do repeated cuts at the same length really easily and really precisely. And then, like I said before, I really like to find a way to connect this hose to multiple tools without disconnecting it from the miter saw. So I think I'll bring up some sort of T here, and then maybe have blast gates on either side, and then a quick release hose for other tools. I also feel like this bench has quite a bit of wasted space, so maybe once that fence goes in, behind it, I could work out some sort of storage system, maybe some polo drawers, maybe more battery chargers, that type of space. There's a lot of room back here. This one's a bit more long-term, but I would really like to create some sort of more permanent outdoor workstation. It's really nice to be able to do work outside, especially when you're working on dusty and dirty things. As it is right now, I do everything out here on this old table base with a piece of plywood attached to it, and as you can see, it's pretty rough. So what I would like to do is create some sort of more permanent outdoor workspace. It doesn't have to be anything too fancy, just something that doesn't rattle around as much as this one does. And then I'd also like to add some sort of retractable awning to the back of the shop above me here to create shade out here in the hottest parts of the day, because it gets really hot out here in the direct sun. So I actually think that's it for all the future upgrades, at least any of the ones I'd want to do anytime soon. But I did think of a couple little tech things I'd like to show you while I was outside. Let's cover those. So first off, we've got these little security cameras up here. Now, if you have a workshop with a bunch of tools in it, I definitely think you might want to invest in some security cameras. These ones were really cheap. They were like 40 bucks. They record internally to an SD card, and they also connect to Wi-Fi and upload to the cloud. We put those security cameras the whole way around the shop, and it's just nice peace of mind to have when you have this many tools all in one spot. Now, the next thing I want to talk about are these wires here in the background, and I can always see them in the backgrounds of my shots, so I think I should take a second and address what they're for. The plan was to put some sort of amp here, and then these run up into the ceiling. We cut some holes and put some in-ceiling speakers in, but truth be told, 99% of the time I just use my AirPods when I'm working in the shop, so these never actually got finished. And then this wire over here is a 14-2 wire that's not really connected to anything. The whole idea here was to create the ability to upgrade things in the future. We could either, throw a light there, or maybe a junction box and then feed onto other things. And finally, I think I saved the best for last here. We have the shop Roomba. Now, anybody who knows me in real life knows that I'm a big fan of Roombas. I've had one in my home for many years now, and I absolutely love it. So when it came time to upgrade, instead of selling my old one on Craigslist or tossing in the garbage, I decided to bring it to the shop and make it a shop Roomba. The way that it's set up is that it runs every night at 2 a.m. It leaves the cradle, and then it just vacuums the whole floor of the shop. Now, it's not perfect because it's an older one. It does miss things, but it's low profile enough that it gets underneath all of the tables, so it gets to hard to reach places, and it does really help to keep the dust down. The only downside is you have to kind of stay on it, make sure it gets back to the cradle, and make sure the dust bin stays empty. Long term, I don't know how great this is for the Roomba, so I probably wouldn't use a brand new Roomba for this, but heck, if you can find a cheap one on Craigslist for 50 or 100 bucks, I think it's actually a pretty good investment for the shop. All right, everybody, that is it for another video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it useful for planning out your own workspace or upgrading your own workshop, or maybe you just wanted to see how this one was set up. If you'd like to support this channel, the absolute best thing you can do is like, comment, and subscribe if you aren't already. And additionally, there's a whole bunch of links in the video description that all help out this channel in some way, especially that Skillshare one. Big thank you to all my Patreon supporters, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace. And actually, you know what? I thought of one other little upgrade I'd like to do in the shop. Air conditioning. It's like 30 degrees right now, and I am sweating. Hopefully I don't look too sweaty on camera. All right, see you for real.